Hi, everyone. My name is Paul Bartholomew, and this is I Want to Hold Your Band. Today's guest is drummer Justin Brown. What a cool guest this was, and what an honor it was to have him. Justin is an incredible drummer. Highly encourage you to look him up and watch him play. He's a drummer for artists like Thundercat and Ambrose, Akinmusire, and just a bunch more, as well as he has a great album of his own called Nayusi. Anyway, I just really enjoyed my conversation with him. His energy and his vibe, just, thoughtful about his music and what it means to him and how he thinks of his gifts and artistic source energy coming through him as a higher power, all of that. Just a really deep dude, and I loved talking with him. Anyway, I hope you enjoy our chat. As always, the links to all the songs we talk about are in the episode description. Click them and vibe along with us. Yeah, we start out talking about this incredible jazz musician who's a contemporary of his, Robert Glasper. We just jump into that in case I was a little confusing about mentioning that when I started, just so you know some context. So, without further ado, I give you Mr. Justin Brown. She introduced me to Robert Glasper.
Yeah.
And was just talking about how he just makes music and jumps around with different people. And that feels like you to me.
Yeah. I mean, I'm grateful that I got to witness his development as a musician and an artist during my New York days. He was there when I had moved there. He was in New York already. I moved in 2005. I just remember seeing the Robert Glasper Experiment concert in New York, one of the first ones at the Knitting Factory. I want to say around in 2006.
Because was he just
7.
an artist by him? He didn't...
At this point, he was just kind of a musician who was playing as a sideman alongside Roy Hargrove, alongside Bilal, alongside Kenny Garrett. I think this was around the time where he had just maybe graduated college. So he was venturing off into his artistry as a solo artist. Just seeing that connection with him and Chris Dave, who was a major influence to me, in as far as drumming goes.
Yeah.
But just getting to see that, they were connected. And one of the first shows, I believe, in New York, and I could be mistaken, but at least one of the first ones I saw was Robert Glasper Experiment at the time. It was a quartet with Mark Kelly, Casey Benjamin, and Chris Dave. And just the sheer boldness and the audacity to come from being this known jazz pianist, carrying on in a traditional sense.
Yeah.
And kind of breaking out and hearing them doing modern music at that time, which was an interesting year. I want to say 2006 or 2007, some of those albums that I answered in the questionnaire, that was around the same year that those albums were coming out, So to see Robert kind of tapped in and carrying on two lineages at that point, it was just really remarkable, inspiring to see in my early 20s. And just to see where he is now with it, to become mainstream while breaking boundaries and traditions at the same time.
Yeah.
So Robert Glasper is a great musician.
So let's start with the first question I always ask, which is the first piece of music, album, artist that came into your life when you were younger that you remember. I'm going to go just a little closer.
There are a couple albums, like I mentioned, Art Blakey, Caravan. When I was about 10 years old, my parents, I had wonderful parents who helped me cultivate my craft.
Which is a huge gift.
Yeah, it's a huge blessing and a huge gift in this time to have that support, And, my dad was hip. Both of my parents were hip to music. They enrolled me into a summer program called the Young Musicians Program in Cal Berkeley.
You grew up in
I grew up in the Bay Area. I was born in Richmond, lived in San Pablo, went to high school in Berkeley, lived kind of all over the Bay Area. But once I got enrolled to that summer program, YMP, my dad was like, well, you're going to be studying jazz and a little bit of classical, but I want to give you this album to check out, Art Blakey, Caravan. And he was like, he was one of the greatest jazz drummers of all time, so I want to introduce you to this, at 10 years old, because this is the music you're going to be studying, And just the moment of like hearing Blakey at 10, it was music that I had never heard before. I never really heard swing or jazz, but immediately felt a connection to it because I grew up in church, So there was something about like hearing something that was older but still felt fresh and relative.
Yeah.
Just due to what was relative, as far as music was gospel music. So it felt like it was related, in a sense. And that was one record that just like blew my mind, just being introduced to jazz. And another record was Mint Condition Definition of a Band. And that goes back to Chris Dave, But in a sense, Definition of a Band was monumental for me at 10 because it was essentially an R&B album, but everyone in the band was singing. Stokely, the lead singer, was also a drummer as well. And, just hearing that and relating that to R&B, my parents would play like R&B in the house, Anita Baker, Stevie Wonder, Luther Vandross. So you would always hear that in the house, but hearing something that felt fresh and young and new, and also here we go connecting the dots to R&B and soul.
Yeah.
And also to Earth, Wind, and Fire, keeping that lineage of like everybody singing and everybody in the band is playing instruments. But, I recall being in the studio with my mother because my mother's an artist as well. She's the one who, I was growing up playing in church with. She plays organ. And she was working on her first album at the time. And the producer, Byron Williams, who was a phenomenal musician, I think he might have been like 18 or 19 producing her album.
Oh, really?
Yeah, at this time. And one of the end of the nights of the session, because my mother would take me to the studio, I had been like 9 or 10 years old.
Oh my God.
It's one of these late nights and they're just like sharing records. So Ken, I believe, goes, check out Mint Condition's new album. And they put it on and we listened to the whole record. They listened to the whole back record and they're just going back and forth like, oh, freaking out. Oh, this is amazing. But me, I was like, when you're that young, it doesn't, I don't know how to really explain it. It was like something that I knew I was immediately just inspired by,
Right.
just like I knew I played drums, I didn't know too much about like new R&B music at that time.
When did you start drums?
I started playing when I was about 2 years old.
Oh my God.
Which is trippy. But yeah, that record changed my life at that young age, just hearing, the record starts off with a drum chants and drum intro. Like it's just Stokely and Chris going back and forth between these phrasings that were just felt spiritual and African. But me not even knowing that, not having a sense of like tradition really other than what I was listening to at home, I just knew that record inspired me. Like I wanted to become one of the greatest as well. I wanted to get towards that.
By 10, were you pretty proficient? I mean,
I was pretty proficient, like in the sense that like I can hold time, I can listen to things and play them back.
You had a drum set at home?
I had a drum set at home. I was playing in church every Sunday, pretty much with my mom, whether I was playing like, the main service or just like jamming with the dudes after service.
Wow.
Or like in choir rehearsals or whatever. Like I was literally birthed musically in the church with my mother,
Okay, I have a lot of follow-up questions. First, an observation, and then many follow-up questions about that time. I don't even know if we're going to get to your list because I have so many questions about you. So interesting, the observation, first of all, that you said Art Blakey, you felt like old and new crossover, how Mint Condition, they had the old traditions, and then your experience with Robert Glasper in doing that, and then how your music, and I was saying what so's draw me to your music is how you seem to so deftly go between these different vibe genres, whatever it is. It's interesting how that was something that was in you or you felt or spoke to you early on, like you were aware of.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. Wow. It's trippy to kind of dawn on it now because I didn't really have the language to explain what I felt.
Yeah.
Nor did I really had the real facility of a drummer. It was just kind of sheer talent.
Yeah.
But it definitely was something in me that was unexplainable at the time that was like, I want to do that. You know, I want to accept music as a whole, you know, and be genreless, you know. I felt that at a very young age. And like, it's funny you mentioned people like Robert because, you know, like myself growing up into the church, Robert was someone in my generation that I saw connecting jazz traditions with gospel traditions, you know, and R&B and hip hop, you know. And, you know, I might have been around like my early 20s. Yeah, that was like 2005 when I moved to New York. And seeing someone like that, you know, I moved to New York to be a hardcore jazz musician. You know, I wanted to swing and play with my peers and play with the guys that I grew up listening to that were still there and the elders, you know. And Robert was someone where it felt like I can relate to what he was doing, you know. It not only was fresh, but I was like, here you see this guy who has the tradition of gospel music, knowing where that comes from, and has connected with post-bop and swing. And it's just one of those things where when you're seeing it in real time, you also feel that inspiration of like, oh, we're on the same team in a way. Like we are sent here to connect the dots of culture musically, you know?
Yeah.
Because I truly feel that, you know, this history of Black music is so long and truly innovating that, like, that is the goal, to be truly free within it, you know?
Yeah.
To know where you come from, to have a better standing of who you are now.
Yeah.
So, you know, someone like Robert, I appreciate, you know, because it was like, oh, that's what we're sent here to do.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That as far as like where it comes from, it's truly connected, you know? So I'm grateful to have like had that feeling at a young age through the grace of my mother exposing me and bringing me to church with her and playing with her, just having that understanding that music, there's a higher purpose, you know, it's connected to a source that we can't comprehend.
So you started playing it too. You're playing with your mom, and you went to that studio when she was doing an album. So your mom played organ, you said?
Yes, organ.
And what about your dad? Played an instrument?
My dad doesn't play an instrument, but he knew a lot about music and a lot about Black culture and music. And he was just kind of like the guy that, like you in a sense, curious, you know, extremely curious about who's on the record, who produced the record, who put the record out, you know?
Do you remember the first one that you bought for yourself, or one of the first ones you bought for yourself?
It was definitely definition of a band.
It was?
Like a few years later, you know what I mean? Just because it stuck. I mean, we had it in the house, you know, but I bought it on my own because I wanted my own personal collection.
CD or vinyl?
CD.
CD, yeah.
CD, yeah. Yeah, definitely. But I will say one of the most monumental or pivotal moments of me buying music was discovering the Miles Davis 60s Quintet. I remember being in high school, probably my junior or senior year, and I have a few mentors from the Bay Area, and I have this vivid memory with being with some of them. It could have been with Howard Wiley or with Daryl Green or a good friend, my brother, Ambrose Akinmusire, you know, either going to a show or going to a gig or a jam session or something and listening to, you know, what we would do is we would listen to records in the car, you know. And I just remember maybe Howard put on Miles Davis, Nefertiti. And I didn't know the 60s Quintet. Like, I knew Kinda Blue, you know what I mean? I knew Bitches Brew, you know, but I didn't know the 60s Quintet. I remember listening to it and just getting chills, just, you know, them mentioning like, yeah, Miles in the 60s, Tony in the 60s, but they never mentioned that it was Nefertiti, you know, so I tried to play it off like, you know, oh yeah, Miles in the 60s, yeah, oh wow, you know, but I remembering probably days later that I went to Tower Records and I knew it was Miles Davis in the 60s, but I didn't know it was Nefertiti, you know, because I was trying to play it off like I was cool with my friends.
Right. Oh,
it was hip. Yeah, Miles in the 60s. Yeah, Tony's. But meanwhile, inside, I'm like, what is this? So I remember days later, because it was on my mind so much and in my spirit, that like I went to Tower Records and ended up buying like 8 or 9 Miles records.
Because you were trying to figure out what it was?
Because I was trying to figure out which one it was. So I ended up buying like maybe, I remember it was like Miles in the Sky, The Sorcerer, ESP, you know. I bought all these records and then just went through all of them, which was really cool because I also was like developing the sense of what that quintet sounded like and what they were presenting, you know, during post-bop, you know. Finally, I pick up Nefertiti, and it's the first track.
It is?
Yes.
I just got chills as you go like, oh.
I literally was just like, thank you, heavens. The heavens opened up. But that was just such a really cool moment in my life, you know, and taught me that, like, you know, the importance of like research and learning the lineage and like connecting the dots, you know. Tony Williams, even at that time, you know, knew Tony Williams Emergency. I knew like Tony Williams with VSOP, you know, but like not the 60s quintet, and just making that connection that like, oh, he's been doing that since. That's where that comes from. That's why he sounded like that in the 80s.
You know, you just one of the people I wanted to ask you about was one of your favorite albums, Ego from 1971 by Tony Williams. So I don't know from Tony Williams.
Yeah, man. Tony, man, I wish I could have got to see Tony. You know, he did so much for music, you know, from at a young age being introduced to the world and to music through Miles Davis. You know, Jackie McLean discovered him, but Miles Davis was where he thrived and he grew and was exposed. Really, he got the exposure. He was what we would call a prodigy, you know. He started touring with Miles, I believe, at the age of 16, 17 years old.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. But just sheer, pure innovator of the craft, you know. And Tony Williams' album, Ego, to me is him sort of submitting to, you know, you feel that he has this sense of purpose, that he's a complete artist, you know, in the sense that like he's not just a drummer, but he's a composer. He has an experience now, and he's connecting music together by infusing different genres and his different influences, you know. Mm-hmm. So I feel like by Ego, that's him kind of like letting go. I'm just going to be me, you know?
Yeah.
At that time, rock is very prominent, you know? So the merge to infuse rock and jazz is sort of the focal point of what we call fusion today. And that just inspires me as a drummer to be musically connected, you know what I mean? Having a sense of rhythm, harmony, and melody, you know, and be able to, I don't want to use the word shine, but to be able to express those things in an honest way is truly inspiring. And I feel like he did it with Ego. You know, he didn't really trip off what critics would think at that time. He wasn't concerned about like even making people feel good, you know, musically. He was completely just submitted to, this is who I am. This is what I'm hearing. And he went for it. And that's one of my favorite albums of his, because it takes a lot to kind of go in a different direction or get out of your comfort zone, if you will, you know.
So to help me understand, like fusion, what is the kind of like birth of it?
Well, I think I believe that Tony Williams is a big part of that, because when he was in Miles's quintet, it was actually him that inspired Miles to check out Jimi Hendrix and what the Beatles were doing and what, you know, was going on in the British scene with rock music. So Miles sort of went in another direction, and that's how you got Bitches Brew. So I feel like, if anything, that's definitely one of those albums that is sort of the Bible, if you will, for putting everything together, you know? There's soul music happening at that time. There's funk music. There's rock. So Miles was being a rebel once again, in that sense that like, oh yeah, I did bebop. I did swing. I'm going to do this now. You know what I mean? And I feel like Tony Williams was a big piece of that, you know? And you can hear it in Ego. And even though I don't think that's his first record, but that's one of his records where, you know, he's stating that like, I'm more than just a jazz drummer, you know. I'm an artist, I'm a composer, you know, and these are my influences, and I'm going to infuse them together. So to me, through my path through music, I feel like that's sort of the pinnacle of the start of fusion. You know, Tony Williams and Miles Davis.
Let's talk about two of your sadness songs. Oysters by, is it Michelle?
Indegio
from the album Weather, and then Esperanto. One of those, both of those, how did those come to you and why are they meaningful to you?
I'm going to say both of them.
Both of them. Okay, let's talk about them.
Because I feel like there's different types of sadnesses.
Yeah.
You know, there's sad of a lost one. You know, there's being sad from being in a heavy relationship and then losing that person. You know, there's different types of sadness. But I think I choose both of those songs because whatever type of sadness that I'm going through, I can go to those that like, in the sense that like, they're reassuring that like, there's always going to be hard times, you know, or you're either, you know, it's okay to make mistakes sometimes, you know. And I feel those songs lyrically tell this story that like we go through different ideas of being in a world of chaos, you know, and there's just gonna be times to where you don't have it always together. But they're reassuring in the sense that like you don't lose hope outside of that sadness. You know what I mean? You don't really give up. You want to give up, but the sadness is the testament of how you persevere in a sense and how you overcome. If that makes sense.
That does.
I mean, yeah, like something with the song Esperanto in a sense, you know. And I think Kurt Elling wrote the lyrics. There's this sense of still being curious in hard times, you know. I may not have money in my bank account, but I'm still going to figure out a way to get to this gig, you know. They give me that sense of like moving forward is not so bad in the sense of sadness.
Yeah.
Or in the sense of like letting go, you know, it's okay to let go and be comfortable with death, celebrating death, if you will, you know, and celebrating that like, okay, I may have made a mistake, but it's not a mistake unless I do it again. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Accepting things like that and just moving forward and not being so like hard on the idea that like life is so crass and black and white, you know. There's bliss in it.
Yeah.
You know, so I think those songs bring me to share bliss.
Yeah.
You know, whenever I'm feeling down or hard on myself or going through something, you know, mentally or spiritually.
When do you listen to music? You know what I mean? Like you're playing it so much, you're composing, you're being asked to add into others' compositions, things like you're in studio. Is there bandwidth and room for you to listen to music? And what do you listen to when you do?
What's crazy is that, yes, there's always bandwidth with me.
Yeah.
I like, you know, call me a nerd or whatever, but music is the very thing that steers life for me. You know, so I'm constantly listening to it all the time, whether it's intentional or not. But yeah, I do have the bandwidth, and I feel like listening so much and being opening to listening to any type of thing is what keeps me authentic in these different genres, you know?
Yeah.
I feel like that is the key. I have to be open, you know, so I know how to help bring out the characteristics and make the music feel good and know what needs to be served in that context for that moment, for that person, you know?
So one of your favorite love songs is Betcha My Golly Wow.
Yeah.
1973 album, the original debut album.
Yeah.
How'd that come into your life? Is that early on?
That's one of the songs that my parents would play around the house, you know, and it was always coming on the radio. But me developing as a musician, it was one of those love songs that like, not only am I understanding like what love feels like, but I'm also like understanding key modulations and 2-5-1s, and there's a lot of harmony in the song as well.
Oh, really? What are 2-5-1s?
Oh, well, 2-5.
I'm like, what?
Me as a drummer, no, they're these chord progressions that are based off intervals within a key and a scale, you know, and it's used a lot in jazz and R&B music. There's a system of being that it'd be circle of fourths or circle of fifths, depending on these movements of the intervals of 2-5-1, 3-6, 2-5-1s. Those are the interval numbers that dictate the chord change. if that makes any sense. But that's basically what's happening within this song. There's a lot of chord progressions that are just beautiful that like complement the lyrics of the tune, even though there might be a lot there, information musically, it never gets in the way of like the mood and what the song represents, you know what I mean?
Okay. This is a person, it's one of those artists that I'm embarrassed I just don't know more D'Angelo. So two of your favorite love songs, Lady and I Found My Smile Again, are by D'Angelo. One from the album Brown Sugar and the other from a album titled I Found My Smile Again. So when did D'Angelo come into your life? Why do you love those songs?
Yeah, D'Angelo came to my life in the 90s via my father buying a Brown Sugar cassette tape. And yeah, man, like he was like, man, this is the new guy, and we would just listen to that record all the time, And Lady was a dear song to me because, I also like was inspired that like, D'Angelo kind of looked like he can slightly be from the hood, he can kind of be a bit gangster, but he's singing these love songs, you know what I mean? And there's a lot of soul influence and a lot of gospel influence. And what's really amazing about that album is like making the connection that not only that he was an important musician and artist at the time, but he was also connected to Jay Dilla, When Lady came out, I think maybe 95 or 96, I was just listening to that as if, this is a new artist, that my dad is playing around the house, and I'm into it. I kind of want to be like the guy who looks cool and can sing to the lady, what I'm saying, but also look, stern and manly and sexy and all those things. But making the connection that like him and Dilla were, basically yin yang in the sense of production. Just making that connection, I always go back to like, that's what keeps me so intrigued to music, because you can be listening to it and you're in the sense like, where does this come from? And then you realize there's a whole lineage, or certain artists are actually connected with each other, So that's one of those albums that was like, new artists on the scene. My parents played it and just making the connection that, this guy is really important to R&B, and to hip hop and doing something that is innovative within it,
Tell me about one of your favorite pump-up songs, 1982 Bad Brains song called Sailin' On. How did that come to you?
Bad Brains is one of the first black punk bands that I got exposed to via Thomas Pridgeon, who's a great friend of mine, also an amazing drummer. But he used to always talk about Bad Brains. Bad Brains is great as all like that,
When is this? What age?
In our 20s, because he came to New York and he had a Bad Brains t-shirt on. And I didn't know that like there was punk music with black artists, And I think I just was influenced by him, like in the sense that like at that time he was playing heavy metal rock music. So I was like, let me check this out, And once I put it on, I was like, geez, like this is intense. This is, and it actually took me down a path of what punk was and what that meant. But just to hear some black dudes playing that intensely full on during that time, for sure, it got me amped and even pushed me to play a little harder on the instrument,
Oh, yeah.
Even that time, Thomas, who I consider one of the greats of the craft of our time as well. He was pushing, you know what I mean? At 20 years old, I was like, man, to see him play with Mars Volta and to be into heavy metal and, it put something in me in the sense that like, okay, I can go a little harder in a sense,
That's cool.
And
man.
Bad Brains kind of opened up the door for that.
Well, that's it. I could keep talking to you. I just so appreciate it. And I just so respect and am so honored that you came. And,
thanks for having me, Paul. And we might have to do a run back in the future.
I love that.
Yeah.
I would love that.
Yeah.
All right.